Okay, so the three handouts that you received today are, this is the one, the first one says Extravaganza, January 9th, 2016. We're going to go over that today. This is not on the website right now, but it will be on there by Monday. Okay. The second packet that you received is basically some handouts to get you started in terms of how to approach looking and studying studying this information for your individual team. So this is just a starting point. Okay? To be successful in this event is going to require more than this little packet. The third thing that I gave you was a actual Scantron. This is the Scantron that the student will be, this is the type of Scantron that the student will be required to mark on the day of the exam. What I would like for you to do today is to turn that Scantron over to the back, and you will see there is a place that says name, and then there are 3 lines below that. When your student gets the Scantron, there will be numbers on the back. Those numbers will be, starting near name, 101, 102, 103, and 104. So I would like for you to add those numbers today. So starting with the line that says name, you're going to write 101, then below that, 102, 103, and 104. 101 through 104 will be where they write their tiebreaker answers. So in the actual exam, there will be 25 stations with 4 multiple choice questions each. And then there will be a 26th station for the tiebreaker questions. So I just want to make sure you understand that, because that wasn't really clear in the official rules that were posted online. So they will be required to write and spell correctly. But that tiebreaker will only be used if there is a tie, okay, if there is a tie. Okay, so let's go over the rules for A is for anatomy. How many people have actually coached this event before? Okay? And probably these coaches will tell you the most important thing for you to do is to go to the Learning Center, because all the materials that we use to test your students on, they are available for you in the Learning Center. So it would be a waste of your dollars to try to buy these models online, because they are very, very expensive. Okay, so go to the Learning Center, yes. The Learning Center, we're going to go over that. So the Learning Center that we recommend that you use is actually at Center Campus at Macomb. So the day of the competition in April, we will be at South Campus at 12 and Hayes. But both myself, my name is Felicia Scott, I've actually been a supervisor for this event for the last 10 years. Okay. And then Mary Kelly, who is my colleague at Center Campus in the biology department, she joined us last year. So this is her second year. That's my newbie, that's our newbie, and she's been working with us. She teaches the same courses that we do, so she's done the anatomy and physiology before. These are the things that we actually teach ourselves on an everyday basis. But our recommendation for you as coaches is that when you want to review the materials for your students, you go to the Center Campus Learning Center. Why? Because I personally will assemble the boxes of the materials for you. And when they get the box, they will have a checklist of all the different models that we will actually use during the exam. Okay? And they only get 1 copy or 1 particular example of each model. So all the examples, all the models that we use the day of the competition, they are available for you over in the Learning Center. The only request is that you wait until after the first exams for our students. Our students will take their first exams starting February the 10th, so that entire week. If you've ever been to the Learning Center during exam week, it's like a bunch of piranhas, and they will destroy you. They'll be like, what you and your little kid doing here, right? And they're very they're trying to all get A's, okay? So that's the thing. They're trying to all get A's, and they don't like to share. So it is best that you go after the week of February 10th. During your winter breaks, especially in Macomb County, most of the students are we are on the same calendar, so we take our winter breaks at the same time. The good thing about that is that we are still in school. Okay, so the Learning Center is still open when you guys are actually on winter break. So if your winter break is not on the same calendar as the Macomb winter break, or actually, are all the schools in Macomb on the same? Chippewa Valley is all on the same winter break schedule. But if you have a winter break, 9 times out of 10, your students will be out of school and our students will still be in school. So that's a good time to go over there, especially during the earlier times of the day. So let's take some time to go over this handout here. So again, I'm Felicia Scott. I teach at Center Campus. I've been there for 11 years in the biology department. My email at Macomb is on this sheet. If you have a question, now the protocol is for you to actually send an email to the Macomb Science Olympiad.org website. You post an email, you post a question there, and then it is automatically kicked out to me directly. And then in the heading, it tells me specifically that this is a question related to A is for anatomy. What was happening in the past, we would put our emails down, you would send an email, and I had no idea who the heck was emailing me. So you would just randomly, some parents or coaches would just randomly start a question with nothing in the subject line. So this ensures that we know that the question is actually coming from and pertaining to A is for anatomy. So you go directly through the Macomb Science Olympiad website. That also ensures that everyone else who is coaching this event actually has access to my response. So if you ask a question, I respond to you, and then my response is actually posted at MacombScienceOlympiad.org. Underneath my name, we have Mary Kelly, who is the co-supervisor, and also her email at Macomb. Here, below that, we have the Macomb Community College Library. So the Learning Center is actually inside the library. They share the same building, and it's on Center Campus. I also listed the hours for the Learning Center, but these hours can change. So I would advise you to actually call beforehand and to make an appointment. By making an appointment, basically you're assured a time slot where you can go to the front desk. You have to have your ID, license or state, or some type of legal ID to actually gain access to the material. You give them your ID, they give you a box. You may say, okay, I just want to work on cardiovascular and respiratory system today. They give you that box, you go to the table with your students, and then you guys can study the materials in that box for a couple of hours. And when you give them back the box, they give you back your ID. Okay, so the hours are listed there. The head tutor for the Learning Center is Jeannie Birch. She is the contact person that you would make the appointment with. Next, the materials available at the Learning Center include diagrams and models of the anatomical structures. I can tell you that 99% of the structures that your students will be tested on will come from models. There may be 1 or 2 diagrams, but we try to use models wherever possible. In terms of what you should remember when you go to the Learning Center, you have to make an appointment. You have to check in at the front desk, and this is located in C, always stands for Center Campus, basically room 116. A picture ID is necessary to check out any of the Learning Center materials. Bring only the children that you will be coaching. And I'm a parent too, I have 7 kids. I understand how babysitting works and how sometimes things don't quite work out. But please make the best effort to only bring the children that you are coaching. Because siblings, right, friends, they see you spending more time with one child, of course they're going to try to get a little of that. Mama, what's that? Daddy, what's that? So it's better for you to basically just block out that time to devote to coaching your students, okay? Appointments are limited to 1 or 2 hours, hour block times due to the demand of the materials. No refreshments or snacks are allowed in the Learning Center. The materials that will be given as student study aids are fragile. It is asked that you and your students treat them with respect and keep them in the designated area. I know when I'm first introducing the lab to my students at Macomb, I play what's called The Price is Right. And we go around and I'll hold up a skull and I'll say, can anybody start the bid as to how much this costs? And they're always lowballing me, right? Because some of those actual skulls cost upwards of $900. And I tell them, your course material fee of $110 doesn't cover $900. So you need to be mindful that these things are very, very expensive. So we already went over the Macomb Science Olympiad.org website. So let's turn to the back. It discusses the day of the competition. And let me reassure you that we take very good care of your children. We want them to win. We're their biggest cheerleaders when they come in that room. I have coached. I am a coach now. I understand. They come in there, they take the exam, they come out, and they say, ooh, I did really well. And then you look at the score, or they don't get to go on the podium, and you're like, what happened? Okay, sometimes there is a disconnect, okay, between how they really did and how they said they did. Okay, so please be mindful of that. Okay, sometimes, yes, they're feeling really good inside the exam when they complete the exam, but it doesn't always, necessarily pay off in terms of their ranking, in terms of how they actually did on the exam. What we try to do on the exam is we try to make them, when they leave the room, ensure for them that they feel like they haven't wasted 4 months of their TV time and video time, right? They know a good amount of the material, but sometimes some of the questions are a little more difficult. Okay, so that's sort of to separate the wheat from the tares. And as many years as I have been supervising this event, we have had perfect scores every year. So it is doable, but it takes a lot of hard work on both your part as a coach and on the part of your students. So keep that in mind. So on the day of the competition, which is April the 23rd, 2016, you need to be prompt. If you come to the exam late, we don't give you extra time, because what happens is, inside the room, there are a total of really 26 stations. Each team is assigned a station. Only one team will start at question number 1. Okay? Everyone else starts at a different question number. When they come in, we actually tell them before we get started, circle the number of the question you are starting at. You do not get to go back if you miss a question. So it's important for you to tell them that even if they don't know the answer, to take an educated guess. Because if they leave it blank, it's going to throw off the numbering of their entire exam, of their entire Scantron. Okay? So even if they don't know the answer, please ensure, please tell them to take an educated guess. Good. So they have to be prompt. We will begin the competition at exactly the time designated. We do not have the luxury of waiting on any team. We run 4 sessions of 30 minutes each, back to back, where we only have about 5 minutes to reset for the next session. So you don't get to come in the room, you don't get to stand in the doorway saying, come on, Johnny, tell me how it is, blocking everyone else. They come in one way and we usher them out the opposite way. So we will basically bring them in from the hallway closest to the front doors, and then we will usher them out into the main area where all the Olympiad stuff happens. So they'll come in the narrow hallway, but they'll go out into a wide open space. And then there will be signs that actually tell you where they're going to exit. They should have 2 number 2 pencils. They should also not have any other things. All they need is 2 number 2 pencils. The problem is we have cell phones sometimes, we have clipboards, we have little, I don't know what you call them, little cheer-me-ons, right? Little stuffed animals sometimes come in with them. And then what we have to do, because the space is so confined, we actually have to confiscate that material. And then we have to remember to give it back to your student when they exit the room. And sometimes in the rush of everything, they leave things behind, and then we're left with these materials at the end of the day where we have to actually locate the person. So please, they only need 2 number 2 pencils. We give them the Scantrons. They need 2 number 2 pencils in their brains. That's it.
No eraser.
Huh?
No eraser.
No. Okay, so just the 2 number 2 pencils. Good. The 2 number 2 pencils should have an eraser on them.
Oh,
Okay, we recommend that they limit the erasing. We recommend that they limit their erasing. So tell them, do not mark the Scantron until they both agree on an answer. Why? Because we run the Scantrons through a machine very quickly, and sometimes if they erase a lot, the machine will pick up their erasers and not the correct answer they wanted to indicate. So limit the erasing. The other problem that we sometimes see is that the teams have not decided beforehand who's going to be the writer. Okay? So you will see them in the competition snatching the Scantron back and forth. That is the kiss of death for any team. Okay? Before they get to the competition, make sure they decide who's the expert on each subject matter, so that if they don't agree on an answer, let's say Tommy's the expert on the respiratory system, if Tommy says that's the answer they mark. If Susie is the expert on the nervous system and they don't agree initially, then they default to the answer that is chosen by Susie. When it comes to the tiebreaker, you have to decide in advance who's the good speller. Okay? They can't be going any, mini, miny, mo, catch a tiger by a toe at station number 26. They have to know these things beforehand, because they will get 1 minute and 1 minute only. No going back. Okay, so students should practice using the Scantron answer sheets and filling them in properly. Every year, we have a problem with this. So on the Scantron answer sheet, there's a little oval. They are to shade the oval in. Sometimes you'll see this. Here's the oval. They'll draw a circle. Here's the oval. They'll mark an X. Here's the oval. They'll do a check. We try to be mindful of that, so initially we're walking around to make sure they're shading in the oval correctly. It seems like every year, no matter how much we emphasize this idea of shading in that little oval, we always have at least one team that doesn't shade the Scantron properly. And that means that almost every one of their answers will be marked incorrect, because we cannot go back and change their Scantron, okay? We cannot go back and change the Scantron. Okay. Students should try to erase as few answers as possible, as it is difficult to make the erasures complete. Please do not have the children bring clipboards, scrap paper, backpacks, purses, or cell phones to the event, as they will not be allowed into the competition classroom. There will be a total of 26 stations. 25 stations will contain 4 multiple choice answers. The 26th station will be all written. 4 questions. All 26 stations, the students will only have 1 minute to answer 4 questions. 1 minute, 4 questions. The students will be answering 4 multiple choice questions per station in 1 minute, except the tiebreakers, which are written down on the appropriate place on the back of the Scantron sheet. Students are not allowed to talk during the competition, but they can point to the correct multiple choice answer or use nonverbal communication. For some reason, elementary school students do not understand that whispering is talking. They do not get it. So you have to emphasize this idea of no talking. And the only way they're going to get that is that when you practice with them on your own and you set up a little practice test for them, you tell them, you emphasize that they cannot talk because it distracts from others. And then sometimes what happens, they'll say, oh, they copying off of me. Well, you just blurted out the answer. You were whispering, but you blurted out the answer, okay? So they cannot whisper. A lot of what I see is that with the good teams, what they do is they use the pencil, the eraser. They might point to the answer, or they may have these hand signals. 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, 4 is D. But they have some nonverbal communication. And typically, other teams are so busy with their own 4 questions, they don't have time to figure out what your nonverbal communication, skills are or what you're using to communicate your answers. Students are, okay, so we went over that. This is a standing competition, so they're not allowed to sit down. Students will move through the exam without sitting unless there is a medical reason. And if there's a medical reason that your student cannot stand the entire time, please contact us as soon as possible. Because the sessions tend to be very crowded, at least the first 2 to 3, and then the 4th session tends to have less students in it, so we can work around that. Students are not allowed to touch any model or picture during the competition. The stations have to remain in the same position for all competitors. So sometimes you'll see this, a student say, I didn't learn it like that, right? I learned it when it was flipped this way. They can't flip it to that position. They cannot touch the models. And it's sort of hard for them, right? Because all the way up until the competition, we've been allowing them to do what? Touch. Touch, move, rotate, and then they get in the exam room, and their first inclination is to take it, touch it, move it, flip it. And then we go, no, because it has to be in the same position for every team. So please make sure that when you practice, you do not allow them to touch the models. Good. Students will not be allowed to return to any station. Parents and coaches are not allowed in the competition room. And I know parents and coaches don't like this. But keep in mind, we're on a very strict timetable. So even if you're in the last session, you are not allowed to come in our exam room. We break down that exam within 5 to 10 minutes. The door is locked. We've had some problems in the past where parents or somebody tried to bulldoze their way in. I'm from the D. Don't try it. I can handle it, okay? Parents and coaches will not be allowed into the competition room. It is a totally fair competition. Usually the students themselves, we've never had a student leave the room just crying because they didn't know anything, especially if they have studied, because it's always, if you have taken them to the Learning Center, these are things and structures that they have seen before. Okay? So nothing should be foreign to your competitor, your student.
Okay, so when they go to a station, that particular station has a model pointing to one thing, and then there are 4 questions on that one thing, or there are 4 different items there?
So there are usually up to 2 models per station. So on average, we have 2 structures per model. In some cases, they can have all 4 structures on one model. Because really, you think this room is big, the room that we are set up in is about 3/4 the size of this room. So take about 1/3 of this room and cut it off, and then we have to set up all those stations in there, and then we have to get all the students. And remember, it's 2 students per team. And so now what we're going to do, which is different from last year, we're actually going to tape off the stations. Because what was happening, some students are used to a lot of room, maybe they share a room by themselves or whatever, okay, what was happening is they were encroaching on the space of the next team. So they didn't know where their limitations were. And so now we're going to tape off the different stations. So they'll know they can't cross the tape. They have to work within that confined space.
Are the questions all about labeling structures, or are they about functions of structures?
Okay, so if we look, so how many people actually copied or printed off the rules for anatomy on the internet? Okay, so there's a study guide. All the structures in that study guide, if you count them up, they're about 100, maybe a little less. Pretty much, what does that mean?
Everything.
If I have 104 questions, almost every structure will be on the actual exam. Okay? So you can almost count on it, that almost every structure will be on that exam. There will be certain questions on the path of light and through the eye, and then there's a question on the path of blood through the heart. Okay.
So the students do not need to know the functions of each anatomical structure?
No, 90% of the exam, 99% of the exam is look at it, what is it? And then there are a few questions where I may say, okay, after blood leaves this chamber, where does it go next? And so to make it a little more difficult, the arrow may be on the left atrium, but the question says, after the blood leaves this chamber, where does it go next? And so left atrium might be one of the answers. And if they didn't read the question and only looked at the arrow, they would pick left atrium. Okay, so especially on those path questions, they have to pay attention to the wording of the question. So, but 95% of what they're tested on is you look at it, you identify. Yes?
So on parts of the brain, it says you need to know the primary function for each
Right,
part.
that's the only part where you have to know function. So let's look at that handout. So here, and this was part of the exam last year, okay? So there are 4 major parts to the brain. Those 4 major parts have been actually, we typed up a little study guide for you. This is the information they will be tested on. So you don't have to go looking out into the World Wide Web to find this information. It is here for you. So when we talk about the functions of parts of the brain, these are the parts and these are the functions they will be held responsible for. Nothing else. Okay. Good? Great. So if you go, let's go to the end, the last page of the handout. Last page is what we would call a sort of a secondary study guide. You have the path of light through the eye. This is the pathway. You don't go anywhere looking for it. This is it. The path of sound through the ear. This is the pathway. You don't go in the World Wide Web looking for the pathway. The path of blood through the heart. That's actually on the actual study guide as well, the one that's posted online. And then the parts of the brain. Anything else? Any other questions? What I have also included, yes.
With the models that are available at the college, I know with like parts of the brain, it's labeled with numbers.
Okay.
Do you have a reference?
So last year, we had a request.
That would be.
That was you, okay? To put over the keys for the models of the brain. And we put them over there. But here's the problem. Sometimes the keys get lost. So by the time you get there, the key is gone. And then sometimes when you look at the keys, keep in mind that we're using very simple names for a lot of these structures. And then on the keys, they're using more complicated names or older names. So you look at what we have here, and then you look at the key, and you're like, oh boy, this is supposed to be this. So now you're all confused. So we put the keys, we try to put the keys that we have over there, we have available to us over there, but we put a disclaimer there. Use at your own risk. Okay? Use at your own risk. Because a lot of the names, a lot of those models are very old models, and the terminology that they used like 40 years ago still isn't, what we use nowadays, especially not for these students. So we don't always use the exact scientific name for a structure. Any other questions? Yes?
Are we using bicuspid or mitral?
We do both. So if you look at the study guide, we actually put both terms on there. So for some structures, we actually put more than one name. So they could get a question like, what is the other name for, what are the two names for this structure? They could get a question like that, but that would be more what? A tiebreaker question, because they would have to write it out. They'd have to spell
I
it.
don't see a test.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, so I have provided you with a copy of what will be read to your students the day of the competition. So the day of the competition, one of us will read these rules and regulations to your student. And then we will say to them, do you have any questions? And usually one of them will raise their hand and they'll ask a question and we're good to go. They are really happy to be there. The people who stress them out are you guys. Don't make this mistake. Don't try to cram information into their brain before they walk into the room. Don't be out there in the hallway testing them on all the different parts of the brain. Let them come in there, cool and collected, in their zen, and ready to take the exam. By doing that, you sort of stress them out. Other students are around, so you start stressing them out as well. So it's not just you and your little bubble. If they don't know it by the day of the competition, they're not going to. Let's be for real, okay? All you're going to do is confuse the knowledge that they already have or make them feel less confident going into the class. Or you make them cry. And that would be my daughter. I try to, she'd be, I can't do blah. There goes one of the team members. But they personally wanted to spend what little time we had before the exam trying to further test them. So get all your studying and testing done about a week before the exam, all the hard stuff done. Then maybe that last week before the competition, have a little anatomy part. Take them out for Slurpees or ice cream or something. But they should really feel that this is a fun activity. It's a competition for you, but it should be a fun competition for them. Because we, as parents and coaches, we want to do the best. Right? And then sometimes they just want to have fun. Right? That's all they want to do. And you make it a very painful situation. Okay, so I've been there, I've coached, okay, I've driven my kids to tears, okay, I know this, right? I've had students, I've had my children go into a competition, come out and say, yeah, we got this. And then I look at the score and I'm like, what the heck happened there? Okay? So I've been on both sides. I'm a supervisor, but I am also a coach. And for those of you who are coaching this event for the first time, don't be overwhelmed. Just get started. Dive in. Okay? Dive in and get started. And ask questions if you need help. Any other questions? Any other questions? So we brought some models from Macomb. Okay? And if you take a look, most of you guys don't have these models sitting around your home. You don't have them in the science room at your school. So please make sure you take a look, because what the students will see is they'll see an arrow with a number on it pointing to a structure. And that's what they're going to see. Very few diagrams. Yes?
Yeah. Don't they have a workshop for April?
No, we only, okay, so we only do a workshop for AS for anatomy when we change the lesson structure. So next year, we will have a workshop. There are the county competitions. So Lance Cruz has its own competition. Chippewa Valley has its own competition. This is basically for the local school districts. And then Utica schools, community schools, has their own local competition. But we don't participate in those. So don't come to me on the day of the competition saying, my student said that wasn't like the Utica Community Schools competition. We do not participate in the local competition. We keep it fair for everybody. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, good.